So we now had a pretty detailed look at how these models are trained and how they work. There are a couple of important implications here. One of the most important things to understand and keep in mind is that all these models have a so-called context window. Remember that you feed a chat history into those models or into the chat application, which then might enrich it, filter it, but in the end forward it to the model. So we have a chat history here. And of course, this chat history might get pretty long, especially if you write long questions or if you maybe attach a PDF document that should also be considered by the model. Because what's happening with that PDF document, for example, that it's being parsed by the ChatGPT application, you could say. The text is extracted and simply inserted into your prompt. So before your question, all the text that was in the PDF document is inserted as additional text. That's how you can think of that. You're not doing that, but the ChatGPT application is doing that behind the scenes, so to say. So we have a lot of text in that chat history. And of course, since the model needs to predict the next token based on the existing tokens, so based on the existing text, that prediction gets more and more difficult the more text there is, because it needs to understand the complex relation between the text at the beginning of the chat history and the text you have now, because all that might matter for the response. If you ask it to summarize a 30-page PDF document, it of course needs to understand the relation between the words at the beginning of that document and the words at the end of the document, and all the words in between. And that, of course, is pretty difficult. It needs to be trained to do that. It must be a model that is able to understand, so to say, such long token sequences that might span thousands or tens of thousands of tokens. The next token that is likely is in the end based on all these previous tokens. And that's the so-called context window. Initially, the first models we had, ChatGPT based on the GPT-3 model, which was released in 2022, they had a very short context window. They were not able to handle vast amounts of input. They were great for short questions and answers, but putting a long PDF document in there was not possible. More modern models are more capable, especially the Google Gemini models are capable of handling even millions of input tokens. Quality may still degrade for long inputs. That depends on the model and of course on your use case and is hard to measure, but you can use certain models with lots of input value. And in general, these models have become more capable and all newer large language models have pretty decent big context windows. So that is growing, and that of course is important to use these models for more complex tasks like summarizing an entire book or like extracting the essence of free PDF scientific papers you might want to give to them. So that's one important thing to keep in mind. There is a context window which is growing, which is not a huge concern necessarily, but for certain tasks and certain models, it still can be. Especially the cheaper models, of course, have more limited context windows. So if you're trying to build an application that uses an AI model to analyze and summarize huge PDF documents or websites, you still might face problems there if you're using the wrong model, which does not have a sufficiently large context window.